Hello and welcome back to NoBS. Today we return to talking about video games. A lot of video game news has been going on this week since 2 new consoles are coming out, and in addition, a number of new games are coming with them. Today we're talking about one specifically called Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Now, for those who don't know, Assassin's Creed is this sort of action-adventure series where you play this character. Typically, it's a character who's kind of like a spy who goes around, hides in cover, follows people, does missions and attacks and stuff like that. It's a sneaking kind of game with a different twist to the story too. There's like a time travel thing to it where it happens and takes place in many different time periods over the series. There's also a lot of entries. This is like a yearly series from Ubisoft that's gotten a little kind of passe, kind of old. People are getting sick of the games essentially because there's too many of them to keep up with. But I think this Valhalla one has a lot of promise. People are very excited about it. It's coming out on all the new systems and it looks really great. I saw some video footage and the graphics are amazing. But with that kind of excitement, with that kind of interest, with these new consoles and this being a premier game on them, that invites criticism. Now, criticism is not something I'm against, but when I hear something silly said, when I see someone complaining about the totally wrong thing, that's when I take umbrage and decide to maybe make a video about it. And I believe that's what we're going to be talking about today. As you can see by this article, it says Ubisoft apologizes for ableist language in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. A description of a character who was badly burned as a child will be changed in an update. Now, that kind of gives you an introduction to what's going on here. We know ableist and ableism is a kind of SJW buzzword. It's one of those protected groups that they kind of try to prop up and protect and overly get excited about and act like it's this thing that's just so wrong, acts like everyone's anti-ableist and stuff like that. And that's why they're coming after Assassin's Creed. Not only is it a popular game on new consoles, it's also this game that gave them an opening. Apparently, there's a character who got burned, and from what I read ahead on, they got burned, and that was part of their backstory that influenced them to become this soldier and to fight and do whatever it is that happens in these games. Now, there's not going to be a lot more spoilers or anything like that. We're not talking too many specifics about the game. That gave you guys the introduction, but what I want to point out before we read the article is basically this is like a campaign coming from a certain SJW on Twitter online. They run a pro-ableist website, like pro people that are disabled or something like that, and they've also openly admitted to wanting to take this game down any way they can, essentially because they hate men or something like that. We'll get into more details as we go along, but I wanted to bring that up before we move forward. This is like a vendetta off of a certain SJW who's getting way too much attention. They've taken it so far that Ubisoft has actually apologized publicly, as this article states, but that's where this story comes from, and I think it's interesting to note before we move on, and that's what we're going to do now. Let's go ahead and read on, and then we'll get back to that. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is out today, and in case you hadn't heard, it's excellent. It builds on the already established RPG foundations laid by Origins and Odyssey, but the meaningful improvements that iron out many of the frustrations I had with both games. Stevens said in the 92 out of 100 review. Valhalla's launch seems to have gone relatively smoothly too. Courtney Craven, the founder of gaming accessibility site Can I Play That, found one troubling issue with the game. However, a description of a character who was badly burned as a child and now lives in fear of people seeing her disfigured face. Now, this image is from the game. It says horribly burned in a child accident. Air Forwine is terrified someone will see her disfigured face. She relieves her fury with bursts of violence. Now, this sounds like a typical kind of backstory, and as some people pointed out, I've seen some other posts point out that this is set in the past. This is during Viking times, thousands of years ago. Things were far different back then. There was actually kind of a brutal society in some ways, and the way they operated actually was kind of crazy because they would kind of push aside people that were disabled and had problems with them. There were even cases where they would give up babies if they were showing signs of a problem. So this was a brutal society. That was a bad thing. We know that's not cool or great or a good thing to support. No one's saying that it is, but the point is that's where the story set, and things like this did happen. So if someone was disfigured, it was kind of a bigger deal. People weren't PC and telling you to be cool and like calm and coddle people like this. That is not necessarily a bad thing that we do in the present all the time. It's good to help people and respect people, especially those that have had injuries or problems. But the point is, this is set in the past. This is a video game too. This is a fantasy. Having a character with this kind of story actually makes sense is the point. It could be seen as a heroic thing, and it gives them a good little backstory, a little beat. But the problem is it's getting attacked by SJWs. They're going after it, and they're trying to take down this popular game on popular systems systems that are just coming out, and that's why it's going to get into a messy situation. I didn't include this in my Assassin's Creed Valhalla impressions piece, but it's equally important to address. This is a character description in the game. They wrote, "It's absolutely unacceptable to talk about facial differences this way. Writers for games and otherwise need to do better." Unfortunately, although not unexpectedly, the reaction to Craven's tweet was largely negative, leading them to protect their tweets. Ubisoft took a more understanding approach, however. This is where Ubisoft responds to this Courtney Craven person. This is the one that we're talking about today, the one that's getting all into the pro-disability stuff, the anti-Assassin's Creed stuff. Assassin's Creed kowtows right here, says, "Thank you so much for pointing this out. We apologize for unintentionally reinforcing ableism through this language. We will remove this language in an upcoming update." So they caved in right away. They preempted anything. They actually gave this person probably more attention than they really needed. This is just kind of like a no-name Twitter account, possibly a vlogger or something. They have a website about this kinds of stuff. I think they post on it and blog or something. But the point is, this is something they shouldn't be doing. This is not an issue. This is a silly part to get upset about in a game. The fact that they say no one should talk about this ever, that just seems really, really authoritarian to me. Like really, really 1984. Like you can't talk about certain issues. Like I'm not allowed to say things if they're offending someone else. But the truth of the matter is, being offended isn't a superpower. Like being offended doesn't mean everyone has to listen to you. Being offended isn't something you should be proud of. It shows you're weak-willed and you have a very easy hairline trigger. That's just not good thing. This is not a stable person who's getting upset about something like this. And it's also just a company pandering to wokeness, a company like Ubisoft trying to appeal to the widest possible audience. That makes sense when they're trying to make money, but this isn't going to help them with customers that would actually buy this game. This isn't going to give them brownie points with leftists who would actually play a game like Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed is a manly macho game for real dudes and gamers and people that like to go around and attack and have these fights. There's epic attacks and stuff in this game. You know, you're battling, you got weapons and all that kinds of stuff. So this is a cool game. This is not something leftists would be interested in anyway. Pandering to them is only going to lose you interest from your actual fans. That's the point. That's the big issue. And that's the worst problem, is Ubisoft caving in and kind of shunning their actual audience. Ubisoft made a similar change in early 2019 to Assassin's Creed Odyssey in response to complaints that the Legacy of the First Blade DLC forced players into heterosexual romances, even if they'd pursue same-sex relationships in the main game. An update was released the following month that made changes intended to better reflect the nature of the relationship for players selecting a non-romantic storyline. Given the increased focus on storytelling in Valhalla, Steven said in his review that it's much better than Odyssey at telling an engaging story that twists and turns according to my decisions. It's not terribly surprising to see Ubisoft moving quickly to address criticism like this. There's no time frame on the update at this point. A Ubisoft rep said the company currently has no information to share beyond the tweet. So that update is coming. They're going to have a woke update. They've done this before. They've been attacked before. It's a popular series. It's really big deal. Odyssey really brought it back to the limelight too. The last kind of 3 games, like they talked about before, the last 3 years, they've gotten back into being popular again. I mean, it kind of waxes and wanes because there's so many games. It's a yearly release and it can be fun. Some of them are more fun than others, but the real point here is they're caving into the woke mob and it's not going to help them in the long run. And the last thing I want to do is point out some more stuff about this character, this Courtney Craven. They're called an award-winning nerd who co-founded Can I Play That? Views mine, but could be yours, they and them. They're from Chicago. This is a clearly a woke person with pronouns in the bio. They run this other page. It says, Can I Play That? It's an award-winning games media outlet for disabled gamers by disabled gamers. So they're appealing to that market, that very, very niche market, by the way. This is not necessarily something that's going to get the biggest, widest audience. These disabled kind of people are in a small percentage and minority. Nothing wrong with that. I just want to point that out because they try to act like they're 50%, 75% of the operation of the world, of the population, and they're just not. They're not that significant. They're interesting. They're not anything wrong with them. I'm not trying to shun them or push them off, but them kind of trying to steal the limelight and ruin things for everyone else is definitely not cool, but not surprising coming from this kind of person. And then the last thing I want to point out, this is where things get really interesting. This is a tweet where they basically openly admit they're trying to ruin this game. So it says, this is from Courtney Craven, openly tweeting saying, In case you were worried Assassin's Creed is the only game I want to ruin, I can't wait to also ruin Demon's Souls for you. Might be time for the angry men to find a new hobby because this that you hate is the future of the games industry. You're welcome. Now, this is someone kind of gloating, kind of bragging that they won. They got what they wanted. They got a video game company to change their game. They're probably feeling very emboldened right now. They're going to do more of this kind of stuff. They call it ruining the game. It's probably games they wouldn't likely play anyway. It's not stuff they're actually interested in. They're just kind of getting involved in popular topics, trying to become relevant by hating on something, complaining about something people might say a channel like mine does or other people do when they review movies and complain about them or something like that. But this is a far different beast. This is someone manipulating topics, using woke politics, liberal left-leaning people and companies, trying to pander to leftists, and also just being a party pooper is what I would call it. It's just being a naysayer, a negative Nancy, not letting other people have their fun in their fantasy games, saying you can and can't do something, like being bossy and acting like they have this kind of, they're in charge because they're disabled or something like that, when really they're just being pandered to because these companies are afraid of controversies, and these people are now openly admitting they want to ruin these games. They want to go after the top games. Assassin's Creed was one of them. Demon's Souls is another one that just came out with the new consoles, and this is their MO, and I think that's why we got to keep talking about it, and hopefully it'll stop. That about wraps things up. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Make sure you comment your thoughts on everything below. Subscribe if you're new, hit the bell for notifications, and until next time, have a great day.